Hello everyone, today let's solve the problem number 550, gameplay analysis 4, right? So what the question states here, just give me a second, what happened here? So what the question states here, we are given a table activity, you can clearly see here, right? So we are given a table activity that records player activity for a game. It records player activity for a game. You can clearly see the column names they have mentioned here as player ID, device ID, event date, as well as number of games that is being played, right? So player ID and device ID is of the type integer, event date is of the type date, and games played is of the type integer, right? So here we are given a table activity that records player activity for a game. Each row shows a player login event, including the date, device used, and the number of games that is played during that session, right? So that's what we saw here in the column name, right? So the player ID event date combination is the primary key here. This one, the player ID and the event date, this combination is the primary key. Just keep this in mind. What we need to do then, what is our main goal here? We have to write a solution to calculate the fraction of players who logged in, sorry, not lagged, who logged in again on the day after the first login day, right? So we have to write the solution to calculate the fraction of players who logged in again on the day after their first login day. So that's what they have mentioned. So we need to find this one. Rounded to 2 decimal places. So they have strictly mentioned that the solution we have to return the integer that is rounded to 2 decimal places, floating point integer, right? So here in this case, a player is considered to have logged in consecutively if they logged in the day after their first login date. This is one requirement, and this is one condition they have given, and then the result should be presented as a decimal rounded to 2 decimal places. This we have already discussed. So this is the question that they have mentioned. So here we have, let's come to the example one. Here we have player player ID. Here in this case we have 1 2 3, right? So it is, we have duplicates, but we have the player IDs 1 2 and 3. You can clearly see here, and device ID they have clearly mentioned here 2 3 1 2 3 and 4. Here in this case 2, this case 3 1 and 4, basically 1 2 3 and 4, right? So event date, this one, and games that is being played 5 6 1 0 5 that they have mentioned, right? So the output that we got here is this one 0.33. Why the output here is 0.33? Here player 1 logged in, you can clearly see here, just give me a second here. See this one, player 1 here logged in on 1/3/2016. You can clearly see here, this one I'm speaking of, 1/3/2016, right? And again he or she logs in on this one 2/3/2016. This one, second one I'm speaking, same ID, right? Player ID, player 1, this is considered as he or she is considered as player 1 here. He or she logs in on 1/3/2016 and again logs in on 2. First logs in on 1 and second logs in on 2 as well, 2/3/2016. So this is the consecutive login, right? 1 and 2 comes after 1. So this is consecutive login. So this one is considered, we have to consider this one, player 1. So this is fine. Player 2 logged in on 25/6/2017. Here you can clearly see 25/6/2016 in this case. So we don't have 26 here, so no consecutive login in this case, so we are not considering player 2 here. This is fine. So next we have to go with player 3. Player 3 we have twice here, so right here, this one you can clearly see here. In this case, player 3 logged in on 2 different dates. One is 2/3/2016, you can clearly see. This is 2016, just see here, this is 2018, not 16. So 2/3/2016 and 3/7/2018, right? So this is not consecutive day. So after many years he has logged in again. So player 3 logged in on 2 different dates. One is 2/3/2016 and 3/7/2018, but not consecutively in this case, right? No consecutive login here. So what we need to do here in this case, so here we should consider only player 1 in this case, right? So we are going with 1/3 in this case, right? So we are going with 1/3 in this case, that is nothing but 0.33. So this is nothing but 0.33. This is what we need to return, 0.33, because they said we have to round off to 2 decimal places. So that is the reason we are considering 33, right? So 2 decimal places. That is what we need to return in the form of output. So I hope this one example that they have mentioned is completely clear. So right, so only the player with ID 1 logged back in after the first day that he had logged in. So the answer is 1/3 in this case. This is 0.33. That's what they have mentioned here. Player 2 and player 3 we are not considering, only player 1 we are considering. So we will be going with 1/3 in this case, because we have 3 player IDs, right? 1, 2 and 3, right? 1, 2 and 3 player IDs we have. So we will divide 1/3 in this case. So 1/3 is nothing but in this case 0.33. That's what we need to return in the form of output, right? So I hope the question is completely clear. What we need to do is completely clear as well, right? So first what we'll do, let's discuss the approach, then let's start writing the query, or let's write the query after discussing the approach. First, let's discuss the approach. So here, first step is we have to first find the first login date. So we have to find the first login date, because first login date, after the first login date itself we will go with the second login date or the consecutive login date, right? So first we need to find the first login date here, right? So that's what we need to do. In this case, find the first login date for each player using, so we will be making use of min of event date, that is min that is provided by SQL, right? So we will find the first login date for each player using min of event date grouped by player ID. We'll be making use of the group by clause here. You can you would have just guessed this one. So grouped by player ID, right? So this is simple to understand. So first step here is we have to find the first login date here. So the next step here is we have to check the consecutive login, whether he or she has logged in the next date or not. We need to find the we need to check for the consecutive login, right? So first what we will do, we will join the first login. So we will join the first login result back to the activity table. So we will join the first login result back to activity table, and next step we will check if there is record where the event date is exactly 1 day after the first login. So this is because we are checking for the consecutive logins, right? So we will check if there is record where the event date is exactly 1 day after the first login date. So this is very important. So let's move on with the third step here. So we need to compute the fraction here. In this case, we need to compute the fraction in this case. So why we need to compute the fraction in this case? In this, they have clearly mentioned we have to round off to 2 decimal places, right? So first we need to count, and then we need to first we need to compute or calculate, and then we need to round off to 2 decimal places. These two things we have to do. So let's go with the compute the fraction here in this case. First what we are doing, we have to count, or we are counting number of players with consecutive logins. In our case, in the first example, we had only one, right? So we had only one player, right? This one with the player ID 1, if you remember, right? So we will count the number of players with consecutive login and total number of distinct players. Total number of distinct players were 3. Player ID we had 1, 1, 2, 3, 3, right? So here distinct is 1, 2 and 3. So distinct is 3. So we, in that case, we had only one player with the consecutive login. Therefore, we went with 1/3. So this output was 1.33. The output we have already discussed this one, right? So after this step, so we have to compute the fraction and round to 2 decimal places. So you would have already guessed we will be making use of the round keyword in this case, right? So this is what we'll be doing. I hope this is completely clear as well. So these are the 3 steps that we'll be going with. This is the approach that we'll be going with. First, find first login date. Second one is we have to check for the consecutive login. And the third one here is we have to compute the fraction. Simple to understand, right? So this is the approach that we'll be going with. I hope the approach that we discussed is completely clear. Now let's start writing the code or query. Sorry. Here the first step is we have to find the first login date for each player as per the approach, right? So first I'll go with first sorry, I'll just go with first underscore login here as. So within this one, as we have discussed, we have to find the first login date for each player. Let me go with select keyword here. Select, we have to go with the player ID, as we have discussed, we will be making use of min of event date as the first date. We have discussed this one during the approach, right? So let's go with the event date as first date. Here, let me go with first date. This is fine. This is coming from the activity table, right? So let me copy this one. So here, let me give from activity. And if you remember, we discussed that we will be grouping by based on the player ID, right? We'll be making use of the group by clause here. So this will be group by based on player ID. So let me copy this one. Just give me a second here. Yeah, this is fine. So the next step here is second step. If you remember, we have to find the players who logged in the day after their first login date. For the, we have to check for the consecutive login, right? Second step in the approach. So let's do that now. So this one I'll just I'll consider here consecutive login. This one as, I'll just give here on this case, within this one, just give me a second here. Within this one, we will find the players who logged in the day after their first login date. So that's what same thought process. We just have to implement our thought process in the form of query. So we have to articulate our thinking process in the form of query, right? So let's see the same thing here. So I'll just go with here select dot player ID. I should have copy pasted. This is fine. So this is coming from, so we have to go with, this is coming from first login, right? So this is coming from first login. So I'll just go with here first login F. So if you remember, we have to we discussed that we will be joining the activity, right? So let's go with here. Let me copy this one here on this case. So this one, let me make use of join activity A on this one when player ID equals player ID. So another player ID will consider. So this one has to be f dot player underscore ID equals a dot player ID. So this has to be underscore, sorry. This is fine. So, and what we will do here, we will go with date underscore add f dot first date. So here in this case, we will go with interval 1 day. This is fine. So this is equals to a dot event underscore date. This is fine. So this is it for the consecutive login. So here in this case, we are checking for the consecutive login of the particular player, right? So we are just finding the players who logged in the day after their first login date. So the third step, if you remember, what we need to do here now, the third step or the final step in this case, we have to calculate the fraction of players with consecutive logins. So let me go with the select. We have to round off to 2 decimal places. So I'll be making use of round keyword. You would have already guessed this one. So within this one, we have to count the players with a consecutive login by total number of players. So that's what we did in example. While I considered the first example, and I showed in the third step in the approach as well. So we went with 1 by 3 for the first example. So we got the solution this one 0.33, right? So that's what we'll be doing. So we will be counting the players with a consecutive login by total number of players here in this case, right? So I'll just go with here if null of count here in this case. So this will be distinct c player underscore ID in this case, this one by count of distinct. So this one f dot player ID this one comma 0. So we are rounding off to 2 decimal places, so I'll just consider 2 here in this case, right? So this one we are going with fraction. So this one fraction table output. So we need to return this one in the fraction table, right? As fraction I'm giving here. I hope this is fine. So this is coming from first login, right? So we have already made use of the first login. Let me copy the same thing here. This one from first login F here in this case. So we'll be making use of the left join. Why? We are making use of the left join to include all the players. So even those without consecutive login. So we have to consider all the players with the player IDs. If you remember, we got 1, 1, 2, 3, 3 the example, right? So we need to consider all the players first, 1, 2, 3, and then check for the consecutive login, right? So first we will go with the left join to include all the players, even those without the consecutive login as well, right? So that one, how can we articulate that one in the form of code here, or the query, sorry. So here I'll just go with left join. So this is coming from the consecutive login, right? So this one, let me copy the same thing over here. Let me paste it over here. Consecutive login C on f dot player underscore ID equals C dot player underscore ID. This is fine. So this is it for the code. Let me hit the run button. So what happened here? I'm getting an error here. You have an error in your SQL syntax. The manual corresponds to SQL server. Right syntax to use near consecutive login as. So somewhere we have done around here within the in between 7 to 10. Let's check. So yeah, you can clearly see here in the line number 7, I have not given comma here. I should have given comma here, right? So this is fine. So if I leave the line, this would look better. So just give me a second here. Yeah, let me hit the run button again. I forgot comma here. I hope this works. Let's see. Yeah, now you can clearly see the sample test case is getting passed. So let me hit the submit button quickly. So I hope this works for all the test cases. Let's see. So in this case, you can clearly see here all the test cases are getting passed. Means the query works absolutely correct on this case, right? So I hope whatever the query that we have written is completely clear. For now, this is it. Thanks for watching, guys.